Hey everyone, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to be looking at Firebase. If you haven't watched the last video, please make sure you watch that because you might be a little bit lost if you haven't. So last video, we were able to set it up so that we could add new cards, add the ability to create cards whenever we wanted. However, we don't have the ability to remove or edit. Now, the remove and edit, we don't actually need Firebase for this. We could have just done this with just regularly updating our state. However, the problem is that if I refresh this page now, all of our content is gone. All of our data is gone. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Firebase to add some persistence to our information. So head on over to firebase.google.com. Make sure you're looking at this site there. Before Firebase was purchased by Google, there is a different site out there, but we're going to be using the one you see here. And if you have a Gmail account, you'll be able to log right in using that. If not, make sure that you sign up and follow the steps to sign up and get going. When you have signed up, you want to go to the console here, and this is where we'll actually be able to create some projects. So I've been playing around with this, kind of just some stuff in class with some of my team, and obviously a couple times running through this noted thing. So what we're going to do is what we will be doing. I said that twice, but who cares? We'll be creating a new project here. So I'm going to call this, why don't I call this video, video noted, I guess. Noted. My region, pick Canada here. Obviously pick your own region. I'm sure this is just for some data that they need. So it'll take a second, it'll go create the project, and then it'll actually give us instructions as to how to initialize the project. Now there are some modules. There's a thing called React Fire that can actually be used for mixing in for React and Firebase. However, it does require a mix-in, and mix-ins in the class format and mix-ins in general are just sort of not idiomatic React anymore. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use the straight-up Firebase library, which we've actually, if you check, we've already included in our index.html file here. So if you want to get started, this is the dashboard here. We'll actually take a look at this in a second, but we want to add this to our web application. So if we click that, it actually just gives us some code that we can copy. So I'm going to actually copy this portion here because we don't need this. We already have that unless there's a big difference between our numbers. I guess 6.4, well, maybe we'll update that in a second, but let's just copy this. So copy that, config, go into our app.js, and let's just put that at the top here. Oops, it didn't copy that at all. Copy, paste. Great. So I'm just gonna fix up these real quick because I don't like that. So, and why don't we just make this a const? Just keep it all ES6-ish. So let's actually update this as well. So is it 6.4, I think it was? Yeah, 3.6.4. Just so we are all up to date, because last time I used this, the messaging sender ID was not a thing that was involved. So I'm wondering if they've added some new features. The great thing about Firebase is it's constantly kind of getting updated, and there's tons of stuff. Realistically, all we'll be using is this domain, the database domain. However, you can do like storage, you can send like push notifications and messaging and all kinds of things. So this is really cool. So we're going to finish that, close that, and this is what we have. So the way that it works is that you have, you initialize Firebase. So we could have maybe done this in the constructor if we wanted, but I've just been doing it out here and it works just fine. And then what we can do is we can reference Firebase and we can grab information from it. Now, I want to point a few things out in the console before we get started, or the dashboard here. There's all kinds of things. There's authentication, which we're actually going to have to change at some point. We'll actually add our own. And then there's database. And there is, of course, storage and hosting and all this stuff. Database is what we are going to be worried with right now, and currently there's no data in it. So the way that it works is kind of like a JSON object. You can just store objects inside of the database. However, you cannot store arrays, which is kind of a little frustrating, but I'll show you how they kind of deal with that, and then we'll actually figure out how to work with that. But for now, let's go to rules over here. And by default, it'll you have to be authenticated in order to read or write data to the database. However, just for our purposes here, let's just put true for now so that just anybody can read or write. This basically makes it so that it's basically public to everybody, which is fine for now. We will get back to having the ability to only read or write when we are logged in a second. I should have pointed out, if you didn't kind of guess this already, please sign up for the Spark plan for Firebase. We don't need to pay for anything at this point in time. So this is our database, and we're going to see this start filling up. The really cool thing about Firebase is it is real time. So as we push to it, it's going to constantly keep updating. And the really, really cool thing is that as we are adding to it, we'll have this listener that's listening for new data that's coming into Firebase and constantly kind of adding to it. So that's really kind of quite nice. So let's get started. So first thing we need to do is when we load the page, we want to connect to our Firebase database. So inside of React, there's this idea of lifecycle hooks, and a lifecycle hook allows us to hook into what's going on and what we want to do at that point. One that we're going to look at is component did mount. So when it is mounted, when it is ready to, or it has been rendered onto the page, let's go ahead and do something. And what we're going to do is we are going to say Firebase. So because we've included Firebase here, it's just kind of globally available. We're going to say Firebase.database. Database is a method, and that will reference this here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a .ref. So if we just do it like this, this will reference our entire database. I think that's good. We'll double check in a second. And we'll say, oops, .on value. So when it gets some sort of value, or the the value action is actually fired once when it's initialized, and then every time that new data comes in, we want something to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to get some sort of data. And you know what? For now, I'm just going to console.log res, and I want to show you. So it actually gives us some stuff, but it's a pretty messed up kind of object. It has all these things on it that are not great, right? So there is a way to kind of get that value really nicely. And there's a .val method on this. So if we refresh this now, boom, great. We got it. It was null. And if you look here, the data is null. What if I put in test here? Does that? Oh, I guess I got to put it in as a string though. If I put in test there, if we go back here, look at that. Without me even updating the page, the data knew to come back. It updated our page right away. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pushing some data into this database. And then since this is mounted, since this is started when the component mounts, this will constantly be listening, constantly be waiting for when new data comes in for us to do something with. So let's actually get to pushing some data on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this slightly. We're going to get rid of this. So we still need to create our note. We need not to do this anymore. We're going to get that out. And we don't need to do that. And here's the cool thing. We don't even have to set the state because that's going to happen somewhere else. Okay, so let's get started. So what we need to do is we need to get a reference to our database. So if I do const db ref, and I'll say firebase.database.ref, and again, we're just going to keep it right at this level. I'll show you later how references work and how we can actually maybe structure our data a bit more, but let's just like throw some stuff in there and get going. So once we have that, what we can do is we can push something into the database. So we can say dbref.push, and we can push an object. In our case, we're going to push the note. And that's it. That's all we have to do here, because if we go back up here, we'll see, I remove the console.log, res.val, we'll see that this data gets pushed up there. So right now it comes back as, well, test. I'm going to set this back to null. So it comes back as null there. Then I'm going to add a note. Test note. This is a test body. Now, does this work? Boom. Okay, see, we pushed it, it submitted the form, and then it came back like this. Now, here's the thing. We're using the term push here, but it doesn't actually push an object, like it doesn't push an array onto Firebase. It actually just kind of creates these objects. If we go back to the console here, you can see now that this is the top level of our application, our Firebase database, and then it has this key, this long unique identifier, which is actually really important, that has the 2 values in it for us. And if we look here, you can see those 2 values. That's perfect. That's really what we need. So this is a pretty common thing where this is all we need to actually add a new note. And since this is coming up here, we need to actually just kind of set the state again. So what we'll do is this. We'll say, and actually here's the biggest issue we have. Our notes array here, it wants to be an array. This is not quite an array, it's an object. And we need to be able to access these 2 properties. And for referencing this later to delete it, we need to keep this key as well. So it's really common. So let's have const, what do I want to call this here? I guess data array equals just an empty array. So we can use const here because we're not changing and we're just going to be pushing onto it. And we're going to use the old for in loop. So for let key in user data, res.val. What we're going to do is we are going to take that key and we're going to set it as a key and then push it into our new array. So we're going to say, well, actually, maybe we should store this out here. Yeah, I'll store that like that. And I'll put this here because what I want to do is I'm just going to kind of alter this user data. And I'm going to set the key as the key. And we'll make it equal key. And then we're going to push the data array with this new user object. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So now we just have this object, this array that has an object in it that has the key, that is the key, and then the 2 things that we need. So what we did was we took the data, we stored it here. So this is just a big object of all these keys. We created an empty array to kind of store up and fill up. We set up a for in loop so that we could actually loop through. And maybe the term key here is not great. So maybe we say object key. Or actually no, because it is going to be just the key. That's really all we want, right? Because we're not changing anything else. We just want to take that data and set the key to it. Yeah, you know what? But though, let's change it. Let's make it a little bit easier to understand. And that there as well. So what we're doing is we're simply just taking, and I should show the original, I guess. User data. So we're just taking this object here, this key, we're just putting it inside of there, and then we're just putting it there. The cool thing is we're not actually altering this, we're not changing that because we're not updating it. We're just using it for our own purposes here so we can actually go ahead and grab an easy reference to that value later. I'm sure there's a different way to do that, but that's just the way that I've kind of been working on it. But how does this work? So how do we actually set our notes? Well, really simply, we can just say this.set state notes, and we can set it to data array. And then when the page loads, we now have persistent notes. This is amazing. So if we go here and I go, this note will stay, I hit add new, shows up there right away. And let's walk through that step again. We called the add note here. I should probably get rid of this console log. We don't need that anymore. We grab the values, we get a reference to where we want to push it, we push it, and then that's it. We don't actually do anything else. We just push it to Firebase, and then we just kind of clear everything up. Because Firebase is always listening, always waiting for that new data, it just knows that when a value comes in, it's going to go ahead, and we're going to do our things, and then we're going to push it to the page. That's really cool. And then if we check back here, we can see our node information. It's pretty great. So what we need to do now is let's figure out how to actually delete a note, and then we'll get to the editing of the note. So in order to delete a note, if we're going to go back to our notes card here, we need to be able to, when we click on this, we need something to happen. And what we can do is we can have a method here called, if we have an add note, we can have a remove note. I'll move that up a bit. That is going to take, I think, just a note ID, and then that's how we're going to actually remove it from Firebase. Now, here's the thing. We can pass this remove note method here. If I go this dot remove note, and we can actually call it from inside of our notes component. And we are passing the note along. So this note now inside of here, if we use our dev tools, come on. So if you use the little selector, you can actually get close to the thing we want. It has the key. So that's actually really easy for us to pass that key up to this method and get it to do what we want. So actually, I always like to do this. Throw console.log, there's like note ID, save that, and then let's see if we can actually, from in here, we'll say on click. We're gonna have something happen. So on click, we want props dot remove note to get past the props dot note dot key. I think that should be good. Let's see here. No errors, we're good. I always like to just double check real quick in case Gulp has silently failed on me. It has not, but if we have the console open and I click this, look at that, perfect. We can actually just get that key right away and remove it. So removing from Firebase is actually pretty straightforward as well. In order to remove, what we need to do is we need to just tell it where it needs to go and then what we want it to remove. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to app.js, and in here, all we have to do is we need to, what we can do, we can actually do this all in one go, but I like to start making these into variables. So we'll make a DB reference that's going to equal firebase.database.ref, so just that one area. And actually, here's where it gets a little bit different. We need to tell it where, what reference. So we're going to say it's going to go to the key. And then what we can do is we can actually say dbref.remove. So we're grabbing that location in our database, and then we're saying, hey, just remove it. So let's see if this works. So we come back here, we take a look, we have these two notes. If I click this, we get an error. Key is not defined. That's because it's called note ID, not key. Let's try that again. Connect to the browser sync. I always just give it like a good 2 refreshes or something like that. Ooh, look at that. So cool. And then it's just gone. It's just gone right away. And if I click this, it's gone. They're both just gone. And again, we refresh the page, no information is there. But if I add a new note, this note is cool. Maybe add like an emoji in here, cow, and I hit that. It's good. I refresh the page. It's still there. I should really get rid of those up there. I hope that wasn't bothering anybody. But it's still there. It's really cool. If I check my console, still there. And if I go delete, it removes it for us. Pretty cool. What I'd like to do now is, if we have the ability to remove, we should have the ability to like maybe update our notes. So if I go back here, I want to edit. So maybe we made a mistake. There seems to be a mistake. Okay, so we've pushed this note. We're like, didn't quite spell that right. Classic, right? So how do we actually get the ability to edit this note? Well, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to make our note card a little bit more stateful, unfortunately. So right now it's kind of good in the sense that there is not a whole lot going on. It just has this information here. It just spits it out. That's it. However, what we want to have the ability to do is we want to have the ability to tell it it's in an editing state, so that we can actually change this H4 and P tag so that they are inputs that we can actually change, and then when we hit save or whatever, it'll actually go ahead and save it for us. So we're going to change this a little bit. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this to, instead of that, we're going to say, we're going to make it a class, and we're going to call it note card, and it extends, gotta spell it right though, extends, wow. Sometimes I just got to go all the way back. Extends, there we go, react.component. That stays the same like that, and what we'll do is we'll simply just put this in a render method. Oops. Like such, pop this over, and then go down there. And I didn't spell component right, did I? Component. I'm missing an N there. Oop, not an M, an N. So what we need to do is we need to give this some state. So in React, when we're doing the classes, state lives in the constructor, or that's where it starts. So we'll call super again here, because remember, we can't access this property until we've called super. So we say this.state, and we'll make it equal to editing. So we're going to have something called editing, and it'll be a simple Boolean that is true or false. Oops, sorry. And then we'll have a note that will be this. So what we're going to do is when the component is rendered, when it is mounted, what we're going to do is we're going to take the props that is the note and put it on here. We're doing this because we're going to need to be able to update the state when our inputs change, and the only way I can think to do that is through setting the note here. So what else do we have to do here? I think that's it. So on component, what we want to have happen is we just want to set the state to be whatever we pass into it. That props.note. So it's going to be that prop that we sent into it. You'll notice that we have to use this now instead of the just simple props, because when it becomes a functional component or a stateful component, you'll sometimes hear it referred to as, we have to kind of change how we reference it. That means that down here, this will actually just become this.state, state.text, or sorry, note.text, or the first one's title and the second one's text. And this will have to change to this .props.note.key. And actually that's still fine like that. And we'll actually maybe just call it state.key, because we don't have to change how this works, right? And the props is still going to be there. We don't have to change how that works. Cool. Okay, so let's just verify that this is still working. Still renders our card, still deletes our card. Great. And we can still add a new card. Adding new card. Oopsie doodle. Okay, cool. So everything still works fine. Okay, so what we have to do now is we need to, when we click on this edit here, we need to say that we are changing the state. We're gonna change it from being editing false to editing true. So we'll say on click, we need to change some stuff. So there's actually a couple ways we could do this. And I think what we're going to do is we could just do this in here. Or would that be the best way? Because we're going to have to kind of like fuss with this a bit. Yeah, no, because if we click it, we're going to say this dot set state. And we'll just kind of do this all in one line. Editing is true. Because that's all we want to do, right? And we can verify that that actually does what we want by, if we inspect the card, click on, oops, it was already right there, React. We have the card, we see its state is editing false, we click it, and it's turned to editing true. And what we'd actually like to have happen is I want to have the HTML here change. So check this out. In the render method, if you put, let's make a variable called, actually I think we might want to make it let editing template. So by default, initially, this is what it is. If it's not editing, it's going to be this template here. So if we put this and we go editing temp, that should still render our stuff just fine. In a second, if it refreshes, still renders, right? Still good. But if this .state.editing, so if this is true, we want to actually make editing temp a little bit different. We want to make it a form that will allow us to submit and do all that. So what we're going to do is this. Inside of it, we're going to have a couple things. So I'm just going to wrap these in divs so that we're able to just have that nice block level styling to it. So we'll put an input, type of text, and we're actually going to set the default value so that it actually by default comes up with something. So we'll say default value will equal this.state.note.title. Now we actually have to give these both names. So I'm going to give this the name of cool. And we need a submit button. So we need to be able to say, hey, like when you're done editing, we'll have an input type of submit. And we'll set the value of that one to be equal to, I keep mixing my single and double quotes. I apologize. There we go. We need to set that value to maybe done editing. Exclamation mark. Oh, and I got an error. Actually, a couple errors. Adjacent must be wrapped on line 19. 19. Oh, yes. Oh, so I think we'll just put a span around these two. So again, this is that problem where because the React elements are just actually functions, you can't just have them adjacent to each other. They have to be wrapped in something so that they're like nicely nested inside of something. So if I save that, check my gulp, no errors. So if I go back here, refresh, still good to go. If I add a new note, we'll just do some gibberish here. Hit submit, still works. Now here's the real one. If I click edit, perfect, it changes. So it actually changes my state of my element here so that I have editing true, and it's changed the template. It's changed what it's showing there. So that now I should be able to like change this stuff and then hit done, and then that will be able to actually update my component. So let's actually set up the form on submit. What we want to do is we want to call some sort of method. And you know what I'm going to do is up here, we're going to make a new thing called save. It'll get past the event. So we'll say this.save. And that's all we have to do. So remember, in order to allow us to access this keyword, we need to bind our method up here. So I'm just going to say this.save equals this.save.bind this. There's lots of other ways to do this, and I feel like there's actually a lot of great modules out there that are actually allowing people to just like auto bind this right away. This is, I feel like, one of the drawbacks of using the class syntax is that you don't have the ability to just bind this right away, so you have to do it yourself. Okay, so we have this. We want to prevent default when that is submitted. And what we're going to want to do is we'll actually want to be able to change this. So let's go console.log E, and let's actually take a look at what we get back, because this is going to actually have a whole bunch of information for us. Or, sorry, not E, this. And more importantly, we're probably going to want to throw some references onto these cards, these elements. But let's take a look real quick. So we click edit, we have this. I could update this, hit done, and then we have our note card here in our save. So what we want to be able to do is we want to take the new information, set that as the state, but more importantly, not set it as the state, but actually update that information inside of React, or sorry, not React. What's the other one? Firebase. So I think we do actually want to just set a ref here. So let's say title. So we'll say ref equals this dot note title equals ref. Oh yeah, we were doing this. Now these references will reference different scopes from the previous one, so we don't have to worry too much. Ref equals this dot, ref, oops, and it's not equals, it is an arrow, this dot, note text equals ref. Not red, ref. Okay, cool. So save that again, refresh. So I click edit. Let's do this one because it looks a little bit nicer. Hit done. And then we have our two inputs there. So what we want to do is we want to be able to update our component. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to get a DB reference again. And we're going to make it equal to Firebase .database .ref, and this ref actually has to reference the state's key, the key. So this .state .note.key, so where we want to find it. And similar to the .remove, there's a command called .update. So we can say dbref .update. So we want to update where that is, where that lives. We want to update it to be the title. Oops. We want the title to be this .note title .value, and we want the text to be this .note text .value. And then we want to set the state to editing false, so that we're no longer editing, and we don't see that template anymore. So if we save that, I think that should be good, unless there's an error, unexpected 27. Of course, I love to throw those in there. No error now. So let's try this. Let's update this to a more meaningful title. Nicer title and body. So if I hit done, it should do that. It didn't. Did it update it here though? Nicer title body. It did. Okay. But it hasn't actually gone ahead and updated our information yet. And it didn't actually go down and update the card. So why is that? Well, let's see. So we updated the reference there. We set all this stuff up. And then that data should have come up through here. So let's just double check real quick, actually. All right, well, actually, we don't have to do that because we have it in the dev tools. So if we go React, click on this, we can see our state, our notes. So let's update this one here. Test. Done editing. It gets test, but it doesn't actually get sent down into our component. I wonder why that is. I'm not too sure why it's not getting sent down, because in our app here, the component gets updated, the state is set, and it should trigger an update down here. I'm wondering if what we actually have to do is from in here, we should just be setting our state ourselves. Because when we refresh, it shows up just fine. But when we delete it, it shows up just fine. But when we just go ahead and update a note, like this, test, and I hit done. Oh, it actually gives us a second one. Uh-oh. No, that doesn't seem right. Is that just a bug? Interesting. But if I refresh, we're going to get all those. Interesting indeed. Well, let's figure this out. So what we have is actually this video is going a little long. It's going to 35 minutes. I'm wondering if we should figure this out in the user login section. You know what? I think we're going to do that in the user login section because I don't want this video to go much longer than this. So we've encountered a bug. It's not quite working as I expect, but we'll figure that one out in the next video. But hopefully you can see the power of Firebase to kind of just give us this quick, easy ability to just save and store data. So we're going to fix this bug in the next video. Hope to see you there. Bye.